Have you ever started crying for no reason at all? No breakup, no bad news, nothing happened, just your chest tightening, your eyes stinging, and before you even understand why, you're crying. If that's ever happened to you, you're not broken, and you're not alone. Someone is standing at the copy machine at work, watching the same page slide through for the fourth time, mind completely blank. And out of nowhere, their eyes fill. Nothing happened. Nobody said anything. The copier didn't even jam. They just stand there, blinking fast, waiting for whatever this is to pass before someone walks by and asks if they're okay, because they genuinely don't know what they'd say. This is one of the strangest kinds of crying, the kind with no obvious cause attached to it. Not a breakup, not a diagnosis, not a fight, just an ordinary Tuesday that somehow cracked open for 10 seconds for reasons that don't seem to add up. If you've ever cried at a copy machine or in a parking lot or halfway through brushing your teeth and had absolutely no explanation ready, here's the first thing worth knowing. Your body doesn't malfunction like that. It isn't being dramatic. It's very likely doing something closer to a delayed report, one that finally found a quiet enough moment to file. Think of it less like a leak and more like a circuit breaker. A breaker doesn't trip because of the one lamp you just switched on. It trips because the whole system has been carrying more than it was built to carry, and that lamp simply happened to be the load that crossed the line. The copy machine wasn't the reason. It was just the last small thing added to a system that had already been running close to its limit for a while. Most people go looking for the trigger in the room they're standing in. That search almost never finds anything, because the actual weight usually isn't from the last 5 minutes. It's from the last 5 weeks or 5 months, quietly stacking without ever getting a real turn to be felt. Here's part of why that stacking happens in the first place. Your body runs on 2 different settings, roughly speaking. One built for getting through a threat, and one built for actually resting once the threat has passed. When you're under real pressure, a demanding week, a hard conversation, or simply holding a family together, your body shifts into the first setting, the one built for handling the moment, not feeling it. Attention narrows toward whatever needs to happen next. Crying in that state isn't useful. It blurs your vision and takes energy your system has decided it can't spare. So the emotion doesn't disappear. It just gets set aside the way you'd set aside a phone call you can't take right now, fully intending to call back later. The trouble is later doesn't always announce itself politely. Once the pressure actually lifts, once your body finally registers the emergency is past, the nervous system doesn't always ease down gently. Sometimes it releases all at once in whatever ordinary moment happens to be standing there when it finally lets go. That's often why people can stay composed through the genuinely hard part and the diagnosis, the deadline, the difficult call, and then completely fall apart over something as small as a dropped pen 2 weeks later. There's another layer worth naming honestly. Sometimes you cry not because something bad happened, but because something safe finally did. A lot of people learned early that showing emotion cost them something. An eye roll, an impatient sigh, being told to toughen up. So they got very good at holding it together. And holding it together starts to feel like a personality, instead of a skill they're quietly exhausted by. Then someone is unexpectedly gentle with them, or asks, "How are you, really?" and actually waits for the answer. And the tears show up, not because the kindness hurt, but because it's unfamiliar enough to catch the nervous system off guard. Emotion doesn't only get stored as a clear memory you can describe out loud. A lot of it gets stored in the body first, as tension, as tiredness, as a tightness in the chest that has no label attached to it yet. That's part of why the sentence, "I don't know why I'm crying," can be completely true and not evasive at all. The feeling arrived before the words did. The body is simply ahead of the explanation, not making one up. That's also why the trigger can look so mismatched to the reaction. A single lyric, a stranger's small kindness, a scene in a film where someone finally gets held. None of these events are actually the source of the tears. They're just small enough, familiar enough, to slip past whatever's normally keeping the feeling contained, and once that door opens, even slightly, everything that's been waiting behind it gets a chance to move. Sometimes what surfaces isn't connected to anything happening this week at all. It's older than that. A certain smell in a stairwell, an object shaped like something from childhood, a stranger's laugh that sounds almost like someone you used to know, and suddenly you're not just reacting to the present moment, you're reacting to everything that moment happens to be standing next to in your memory. This can include grief that never got a clear occasion to be grieved, a friendship that faded without an ending, a version of your life you quietly stopped expecting, a person you miss in ways that don't have an anniversary attached to them. There's no ceremony for those losses, so they wait, sometimes for years, until something small and unrelated finally gives them an opening. There's a cost to holding emotion, and that isn't always visible from the outside. Keeping your face composed doesn't mean the rest of your body agrees to be calm. Researchers who study emotional suppression have found that hiding an emotional reaction can actually increase physical stress responses happening underneath the surface, even while nothing shows on the face at all. In plain terms, staying composed can be quiet, invisible work, and your nervous system keeps a running total of that work, whether you're tracking it or not. None of this means every tear needs solving, and it definitely doesn't mean crying is always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's simply information that you've been moving faster than you've had room to feel, that you're more tired than your schedule admits, that something has been sitting unprocessed for longer than you realized. The more useful question usually isn't "what's wrong with me?" It's closer to "what has my body been carrying that I haven't had a real moment to feel yet?" That question matters more for people who are used to being the reliable one, the friend everyone leans on, the parent who holds the household together, the coworker who never seems rattled. Being steady for other people is a real skill, but it isn't the same thing as being unaffected. And the difference between those two tends to show up eventually, usually somewhere quiet, usually when nobody's watching and nothing is technically required of you anymore. That question doesn't need an instant answer. Sometimes clarity doesn't arrive the moment the tears do. It shows up later, quietly, while you're making tea or driving home. Once the body has had its turn to speak, and the mind finally catches up to what it meant. If this kind of crying becomes frequent or shows up alongside constant exhaustion, a loss of interest in things you normally enjoy, or a persistent low mood that doesn't lift, that's worth mentioning to a doctor or therapist. Not because it means something is broken about you, but because your experience deserves real attention, not just an explanation you come up with alone at 2 a.m. for the smaller, quieter version, the copy machine, the parking lot, the middle of an ordinary afternoon. Maybe the kindest response isn't demanding an explanation in the first 5 seconds. Maybe the tears were never the problem. Maybe they were the first honest thing your body had been allowed to say all week.